All right. Hey, good evening, everybody. It's 5 o'clock here at Central Time. I'm out coming to you not from my normal location, as you can tell. I'm out at the first annual National Community Emergency Response Team Conference in Galveston, Texas. And I know tonight was supposed to be focused on we were going to start our sessions of WIMRs and documentation, but I had the chance to sit down and attend a presentation by FirstNet and AT&T representative, and I wanted to bring this to everybody because if you've been to NISA or some of the other national conferences, you've heard FirstNet being discussed, but I've never really seen a lot of information provided on it. Like, what is it? How do you join? Can we join? Can we use it? What exactly is FirstNet? Well, after sitting with in the conference, I approached the AT&T representative and the federal liaison officer that was representing FirstNet here, asked them if I could get their slides and present this to the Civil Air Patrol because we are one of the sponsored members that can use this service. And I wanted to bring this presentation to you guys, and I didn't really want to wait, a couple months till we get through some of our other cycles. So I decided to break this one in and provide the presentation now. One, so I don't forget. Two, I wanted to make sure all the information was fresh on my mind. But three, the biggest thing is because I'm coming to you from a small Airbnb here in Galveston, Texas, I wanted to make sure that if I did have people showing up tonight, or if nobody did show up tonight, that my bandwidth would be good enough to give the presentation. And if not, I wanted to get this recorded and presented to all of you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen and let's get this presentation started. Again, if you're watching later, send me an email or leave comments, ask questions in the comment section. And I definitely always want some dialogue started because that is how we learn. So where did my presentation go? Right. They sent this to me in PDF format. So this would be my first time doing a slideshow presentation off a PDF. Okay, so I'm hoping everybody is seeing this. Oh, go back. It is on a timer and we don't want that. Man, this is going fast. Technical difficulties. All right, so let's go to tools. I'm sure if I had people in presentation right now, they would tell me how to fix this. This is definitely the first time I have done this off of PDF. Okay, let's see if it advances on its own. No. Okay, so FirstNet. So the image here is obviously this is a CERT conference, a Community Emergency Response Team. If you're not familiar with this program, definitely check out your local county, usually your local county, your local university, some large businesses will have CERT programs. It's a FEMA sponsored program, and it's just like our tagline for Civil Air Patrol, citizens helping citizens and for citizens helping communities. That is what CERT is. It's a volunteer organization of community members supporting their community during times of disaster. I know I'm on the CERT team in Stafford County. We supplement our fire departments. We supplement our search and rescue team, which I'm also on. And we do large scale events. We help provide cooling tents, triage work, supporting rehab for firefighters or law enforcement if there's a major event. CERT is your end-all or catch-all organization that is trained in many different aspects of emergency response, and it's a good additional volunteer opportunity. Also, it's an ES qualification for Civil Air Patrol. So if you go through the FEMA CERT training and you go through the basic course, you can add that to your 101 card. There are some states where their Civil Air Patrol members actually help the community in a CERT manner. Virginia, we're not there yet. It's something that we've talked about, potentially being an additional resource that VDM or local agencies could potentially request. But there's a lot that goes into that, and we're not there yet. But I highly recommend if you have extra time and you want to get more emergency response experience, you volunteer for your local CERT program. And if you have questions on how to start a CERT program for your local community, just reach out to me. I can get you into the resources. If you live in a gated community or an area that has an HOA, there's a way that you can start a CERT program for your housing association where you are helping your neighbors in time of emergency. So that's my pitch for CERT. I'm a big believer in communities are stronger when they support themselves, and you become safer and more trusting of local government and everything when we have volunteer backing. So that's why I do a lot of volunteer work across many organizations, and I love the emergency response field. So that's my plug. Now back to FirstNet. So we're going to talk about this subscriber paid program here. Let me play. Pause that. Okay, please don't change. All right, if you're viewing this later, booger. Okay, if you're viewing this later and you want to apply, you can either go to FirstNet's website, or you can scan this QR code here, and it will take you to their website, and you will go through a checklist to see if you qualify to be on FirstNet. And I'll go into what primary roles and extended primary roles are later. But as you can see, Civil Air Patrol is all the way at the bottom on the extended primary. It says pilot, but after talking to the representatives, anybody within the emergency services realm of Civil Air Patrol can apply for a FirstNet service. And I'll talk about what's the difference between primary, extended primary, and why are these roles here as we go through the rest of the presentation. But if you go to the FirstNet website, you fill out the questionnaire and walk through it, it'll tell you. But right now, the only option you can select from for Civil Air Patrol is currently pilot. I was talking to them about what would need to get that expanded, that definition expanded, and that would need to be our national headquarters representatives talking to the federal government as a federal organization to a federal organization to get that title changed or that option changed. But they said anybody within the emergency services realm, filling the emergency service, or ground teams or ground branch directors or incident command staff, all can apply for that. Okay, looking at sort of the history of how FirstNet came around. So this is a rare thing. There's very few federal organizations that are built specifically to support local governments and communities. Usually it's a federal program, and there's tons of bureaucracy, and it's convoluted, and it's not user friendly. I mean, look at any federal program, those are common complaints. but the idea came up for FirstNet as a first responder network for emergencies that reside in a separate bandwidth. When communication starts going down, how do we keep our emergency responders and our emergency managers communicating and sharing information? So if you look at this timeline here, AT&T, has been around for well over 100 years, leading telecommunications from all types for cell phones, landlines. Some of us, or a good percentage of us, are old enough to remember, definitely not in the cadet programs, but senior member programs, car phones and pagers, all the way back to telegraph lines and landlines. In February 2012, the federal government authorized the First Responder Network Authority and gave them the tasking to develop and oversee a dedicated nationwide network for first responders. And so they put out the pitch to see who could develop this, because what does the federal government know about managing telecommunication networks? Nothing. The commercial industry does. And so the government sort of oversight program for FirstNet recognized this and admitted this, and so they reached out to commercial organizations. There was one Canadian organization that sort of rogered up and wanted to bid for it, but they just didn't have the overall network capability, the resiliency to accomplish the goals that the federal government had in mind. Then AT&T rogered up like, yeah, we'll do that. We definitely want to jump on board with this. So in March of 2017, AT&T was awarded the contract to build and maintain FirstNet. So, and then in 2018, FirstNet completes the private core network build out. So the background infrastructure and security protocols and all the hardware outside of the cell tower sort of program. In 2019, December 2019, FirstNet hits 1 million connections, serving over 10,000 public safety agencies nationwide. So that's pretty substantial accomplishment there. And as of October of 2020, there's been 14,000 agencies that account for 1.7 million connections using FirstNet. And then as of today, we're looking at October 2021, when this was built shortly after this presentation. There's 18.5 thousand, over 18,500 agencies with over 2.8 million connections on FirstNet. So that's individual subscribers and other devices that are on the network. So that's looking at the timeline. Let me advance here. So what is FirstNet? Again, it's a federal program supported by the public/private organization or a company, which usually that doesn't work well because private organizations, companies, corporations don't like necessarily opening their back door and their filing cabinets to the federal government for oversight because of proprietary information and a lot of concern that the federal government is going to mismanage or misuse private information, or a corporation like AT&T doesn't want information about how they do business, both on a management side, hardware side, technology side, accidentally getting leaked through the federal government to their competitors. But this is an innovative program. So FirstNet, the government side of it is provided $6.5 billion in a success-based funding. So it means AT&T has to hit very specific benchmarks over certain time periods in order to get paid. And what they explained to us is that money is promised over a 5-year period. And if AT&T doesn't meet these benchmarks, and they don't get the money, they don't get paid for that round of payment. The federal program oversees the customer experience, ensuring that customer satisfaction is being maintained by all these local government entities for first responder and emergency management. We are segregated onto the 20 megahertz spectrum, so that is solely for emergency management during a time of disaster. And I'll talk that outside of the disaster declaration, AT&T has the ability to use or lease some of that spectrum. So they end up paying the government money to use that. FirstNet also does the program management. They ensure that priorities are being set, the overall focus, goals, and objectives are being met. So it's still a government program, and it's dedicated to public safety. So whatever the public sector needs down at the local government, the federal program actually goes down and builds out the capabilities to meet the tailored requirements of the local governments that are dealing with the disasters. Again, you'll not see pretty much any other federal program that is tailored to the small government other than this program. So on the AT&T side, excuse me, they spent or they are spending about $40 billion. So what they said is like, hey, not only are we going to accomplish your goals, but we're going to do it a little bit quicker than what you expect, or what your time frame is, and we are going to give FirstNet full access to all of our existing infrastructure, and then we will build and expand based on where the public sector needs additional resources. So AT&T is not building these additional cell towers and capabilities where they think they can make some money off of it and advance their commercial network. The government is going to these local governments like, where are these rural areas that you have no connectivity, that you need connectivity during a disaster, or these areas that are often hit in our communication spectrum wise isolated from the rest of the state or rest of the county. The government identifies those areas. AT&T, with their liaisons, will also identify those areas, and they'll build additional infrastructure to serve those areas, specifically to support FirstNet. Now, when they build those towers, does AT&T benefit from it? Yes, because during non-emergency times, like say where take Texas here, for example, there's some areas where it's just ranches. Nothing's out there. Maybe a town has a sheriff. They're not going to be using, no matter how much Netflix that sheriff watches or streams on his phone, he's not using all of the bandwidth on that 20 megahertz spectrum. So during that time, when there's not an emergency going on, then AT&T will lease out that bandwidth. They'll pay the government money to use those towers or use that infrastructure or use that bandwidth for commercial purposes until an event kicks off, and then the primary users go back to being FirstNet, and the commercial users are then bumped from that to manage the emergency. AT&T also helps manage and bring on technology and innovation, because any of us that's worked in the government or DoD sector, unless you are working in some super top secret lab with government contract organizations like Skunk Works or something like that, the government's not usually leading in innovation and technology development, especially in the cyber or telecommunications realm currently. And we can see that by stuff that pops up if you follow peer-reviewed journals or defense journals. Signal magazine's one of them for UCOM guys or cadets. I highly recommend uh, becoming a member of the Armed Forces Electronics and Communications Association, or AFECA, and subscribing to the Signal magazine. You get to see a lot of the innovation, but most of the real innovation and technology advancements in IT, uh, communications is all coming from the commercial sector. And so AT&T is leading that, and they can innovate and upgrade, this network as quick as they can develop the security protocols and everything else, and then upgrade their towers in their network. AT&T also, in support of with the government, deals with the network security for FirstNet, because think about all the sensitive information that emergency management, emergency response is passing over the network. They need to communicate to manage it. Your incident command posts or your area commands need to coordinate with logistics movements, medical resources, funding. That's a lot of really sensitive information. And being a prior Intel guy, I also look at that's a huge security vulnerability. Huge. You're a target. People will want to attack that network just because of the type of information that is being passed on it. Like for no other reasons, just to see if they can get access to it. Not knowing what's being passed, they just want to attempt it. So AT&T helps stay on the cutting edge and oversee the security of the network. And then, of course, it's all integrated into AT&T's overall telecom or telecommunications enterprise. So they have this massive footprint that they were able to automatically I won't say dump, but integrate FirstNet into, where the government wasn't having to go out and fund building all brand new separate cell towers and switching stations and all the behind the scenes stuff that we are able to, AT&T was able to integrate their full existing infrastructure. So that's why we got access, or it says on here, access to existing $180 billion infrastructure. So that saved the US government a lot of money, and us ultimately in tax dollars, a lot of money. Okay. So why FirstNet? We need, or when a crisis happens or emergency happens, we need to be able to communicate, and we need to be able to communicate on a fast and unrestricted bandwidth. And because there's a lot of voice communication, data communication that needs to get passed to manage logistics, command and control, finance, all of your operations stuff. And so we needed a separate network. And this is true if any of you remember what happened to all telecommunications and even the internet post 9/11. Like immediately as 9/11 was happening, and within the next 24 to 48 hours after 9/11, we could not communicate as a nation. Phone lines were busy signals. All of the electrons that were going across both phone, landline, cell tower, internet just bogged down the whole system. It just crashed everything. And that made it even harder for emergency response personnel, emergency managers, to control the incidents and to coordinate resources. So that's what drove this idea in the first place. So now with FirstNet, you have a prioritized network access. So you never compete with commercial traffic because we're on a completely separate bandwidth. It's high security and high resilience, so that there's more security added to this network than your normal commercial lines. And also there's like 24-hour cybersecurity specialists that are just focused on maintaining the security of this network. And then advanced and augmented coverage. So as I was saying, they're building out in the urban to rural area connections. So we're getting additional ways to communicate in those extremely rural areas that normally wouldn't be a phone company wouldn't normally dedicate a lot of resource and money to building additional towers or 5G towers and stuff too, because the population density, if you look at an economic standpoint, cost per user per tower, you get more money per customer in a more urban area because more people are using that tower um, at a time. So you're getting more use out of that money. It pays for itself. In a more rural area, you may only have one or two devices hitting a tower at a time. So you figure all the money that you spend into it, those are two very expensive customers. Compared to in a high population density area, the cost per customer is a lot lower. So you're getting more customers um, to pay for that service. I know that's probably not the most clear way to explain it, but also it's a fast network because even only having 118,000 subscribers or 2 million connections on the network, that is small for a wide area network on that bandwidth. That's not a lot of uh, user density for the pipeline that we have access to. So it's a much faster network, better connectivity, and the rates are extremely affordable. So some organizations, they purchase a bulk sort of plan where they're a primary using authority, and then they issue out, devices to their members. So police officers, firefighters, emergency managers, but most of the users are what we're discussing here are the paid subscribers. So you're authorized to be on the network, but you pay to play ultimately. So the FirstNet core, this is what the government is overseeing. It's uh, a all of this is separate specifically for FirstNet. So it's dedicated to FirstNet users. It's segregated all of the FirstNet traffic. So no commercial traffic goes over these the core hardware. It's only there and maintained and secured for FirstNet. So that enables more enhanced security, defense in depth, more robust monitoring, highly secure both the network security, the cyber security, and the physical security. So these locations where the FirstNet backend cores are located are highly secure facilities. They are geographically redundant for reliability. So if one place is heavily hit, then all the backup power and generator and everything else goes down in that area. First core or FirstNet core hardware loses power and is no longer functioning. It is redundant, being supported by other facilities and other locations and network hubs. Trying to not get too technical with some of the definitions and stuff for the non network or communications, cellular communication or landline communication, familiar people in here. So it's kind of hard to talk around terms. It has 24/7 monitoring and dedicated US-based security operations. So there's no farming out. We're not contracting companies outside of the US for cheaper labor. This is all US maintained and US ran, and 24/7 monitoring and dedicated teams to do engineering, architecture, updates, So again, this is FirstNet is like its own. I should have explained this a little earlier. You have your T-Mobile plan, you have your AT&T plan, you have, well, not Sprint anymore because Sprint and T-Mobile merged, which I think is all owned by SoftBank, which is a Japanese company. Um, what's Cricket and some of these other providers. FirstNet is just like that. Instead of having your AT&T plan or your T-Mobile plan, you have a FirstNet plan, and you can use it whenever you need. The difference is once an emergency happens and the normal commercial lines go down, you are still able to communicate because you have a black SIM card. You have a FirstNet SIM card. Now, your traffic and your bandwidth will be throttled based on your priority levels. And so this is managed at the government level with support at AT&T, depending on your area location and some of your qualifications or who you report to, who your sponsoring agency is in your role. Your priority level can be bumped up or it can be throttled back, limiting you, say, certain upload speeds or connectivity priority. So if it's a major event and we have a flood of first responders and emergency management personnel and resources into an area post a major national disaster, if you're you may be given a lower, a higher priority, which means like your calls will, take priority on the tower, or your data will get priority speeds for upload and download. But that's all managed at the program office level there. And so looking at eligibility, so it's one community together. So originally started out just with these primary users. Looking at only law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency management, your EOCs and 911 dispatch centers. But then as things progress and as major incidents were occurring, we realized pretty quick, just like if you look in your EOC, if you ever get a chance to work in an emergency operations center, it's not just your organization that's in the EOC. You, depending on what the situations are, you may have Army Corps of Engineers or civilian company engineers in your EOC. You could have flood control organizations and water management. You have energy company like Dominion Energy representatives. For the big freeze in Stafford, we had a liaison officer from Dominion that was on call to help coordinate, down power lines and all this other stuff. You'll have oil, gas, healthcare, utilities, transportation. And so they've extended FirstNet for these type of organizations. And what will happen is, say that it's a flooding incident right now, and the incident commander and all the organizations say, hey, we want the water purification, the water centers, the county, whatever. Uh-oh. I think I got slightly disconnected. Let's go back into share. Looks like we're still recording. Okay. Again, internet issues. Sorry for that. All right, so going back to the issue is if flooding is the main thing and we're trying to open up canals or open overflow piping or whatever, then all the flood control personnel that are on FirstNet in that area, whoever's managing the incidents, law enforcement, an emergency management, whoever, they will contact FirstNet and say, we want you to raise the priority of these individuals or this company or this organization up to primary users. They have a higher priority because that is the focus of our mission right now. If it's a tornado and we're trying to get healthcare and utilities back online, we need to get power back to the hospitals and such, then they would be given priority. They'd be bumped up to priority users until those missions are accomplished, and then they get reverted back to whatever priority level they were put at that time. So that's how it works. So what devices can you use? Here is a list of wireless devices. So if you're an Apple user, as long as you have an Apple iPhone XR Plus or newer, you can use, and this goes on security, security protocols, and having 20 megahertz transmitter receivers integrated, that having that bandwidth integrated into the device. So if you're a Samsung user, Note 9 or newer, Samsung S9 or newer, LG 35 Thin Q or newer, then you can get you can use the black SIM card. You meet these companies with these phones not only meet the bandwidth requirement, but the security requirements to be on the network. So again, it's not just, can I talk? Do I have the capability to transmit and receive data and voice calls? But also, what is the security of the device? Is it going to be vulnerable to spoofing or hacking or some of the other stuff? So if you're wondering, hey, do I need a new phone? Well, if your device is older or previous model than any of these, then yes, you would have to upgrade your phone. Now, the good thing is you can go into AT&T, your local AT&T store, and be like, hey, I want to apply for the FirstNet. And then they will work on deals on phones and phone lines and, getting you a compatible device. But if you already have a compatible device, then all you have to do is load a new SIM card. And actually what you do is, say I have TNT or T-Mobile plan, I would just go to T-Mobile and be like, hey, I'm canceling my line. I am going to, and I would go to AT&T and start my FirstNet subscription with them. And then I will pay them the monthly fee for my service, and all of my service is through FirstNet. The only way you can be on FirstNet is with a FirstNet SIM card, and at the top of your phone, or on top of your device where it says what network you're connected to, it will say FirstNet. It won't say AT&T. It won't say anything else, because FirstNet is its own service providing network. Now it's backed and maintained and overseen by AT&T, but it is, just envision it as its own company, like it's complete separate service. There's also wireless devices. These are some vehicle mounted devices. So the Rocket IoT, that has a newer name, I believe, but that is a device that you can mount in squad cars, and you can relay both radio traffic and video traffic over it. You have some of these Airlink routers, the Netgear Nighthawk router. Again, these devices have to meet certain security protocols. They have to be able for, certain type of security and encryption. So that way, not to get into cyber operations and stuff, but so they are less vulnerable to being attacked as a weak link. So a lot of Wi-Fi routers aren't that secure. And somebody with the know-how, if they can't break your phone and they can't break your computer, they will actually break the router as their access point. So these have to have a certain level of security. So that is the user end. Now we'll go ahead and talk into the emergency preparedness. Like, what else does FirstNet bring to the table to support an emergency response? So for Civil Air Patrol, we are probably not going to be requesting these resources that we're going to see from here on out, but it's good to know that they're available, that you may see them on site. If you are some states, they have a really good relationship with Civil Air Patrol. So if they have to stand up an IMT or emergency management team, to get an incident command staff put together. Then you may be a resource manager or in the planning section or operations section for a broader incident, and you may be able to request some of these or activate them if they're not already requested and activated. So FirstNet provides these to the local government organizations that are dealing with an emergency free of cost. It's a part of their overall contract when they buy into FirstNet. So they have approximately 150, a little bit more dedicated deployables. So as you can see here, they have an aerostat, which is a technical term, I guess, for the blimps. Then they can do tethered SUASs that can provide coverage. And then they have these deployable light trucks or satellite cells. So they set up and they're a mobile cellular tower that will uplink through satellite. So if all the local cell towers have been damaged or degraded, then they can bring these assets in to create a local cell network to be able, and with the satellite upload or uplink and downlink, we'll be able to communicate outside of the disaster area and link all of the FirstNet users within the disaster area so they can continue to command and control all the operations and logistics support and everything else. They can support both planned and unplanned events. So a lot of people don't realize like major sporting events or major like 4th of July celebrations or anything like that. You can stand up an emergency management team to deal with those. Fredericksburg made the news because of some planning issues with the Stafford County school district and an event a couple of Fridays ago where they didn't really have a good plan in place. And there's a lot of heat related injuries or illnesses associated with that event. If we have a major event that we're supporting, these resources can actually come in, especially say you're having a big concert or a big festival in an area that's already really rural and doesn't have good cell coverage, and all of the participants are taxing the commercial infrastructure. And then all the emergency management personnel and the response personnel, law enforcement that come in is starting to tax the limited towers that have that 20 megahertz bandwidth, and potentially they can bring in some of these satellite trucks, the light trucks, and put a mobile cell sites up to help broaden that pipeline to allow more data, to allow VoIP data to be transmitted and whatnot. And then for unplanned stuff, what they look at is they actually have their own weather. FirstNet has their own weather people, meteorologists hired that help make decisions on where to start pre-positioning or slowly moving resources in so that they were closer to an area, especially like hurricanes. As the tracks get more narrow and narrower, more narrow, and we think we know, or they think they know where it's actually going to be making landfall and what are the areas that are going to be most affected. They'll actually slowly be moving resources closer and closer to those areas. They won't pre-stage them in the area because you don't want to pre-stage resources and the storm goes in a completely different direction and now your resources are delayed, or you pre-position these resources in the storm track and now you can't deploy those because either they're damaged or they're isolated and cut off due to the effects of the natural disaster on the local environment. And say like a highway was severed and now you can't get that resource in. So what they do is they'll slowly encroach those resources to the highest probability affected areas as the weather data, say in this example, hurricanes, becomes more solidified. if that makes sense. Again, these are at no cost to the organizations that request it. So here's some of the numbers. This is pretty impressive because, again, FirstNet's not widely known about to the general public, but especially within our organization, I don't know too many people that have much information on FirstNet. But we're looking here, again, 24/7 priority access and support with voice and data communications, a physically separate network core fully dedicated to public safety. That's a huge piece. And then government oversight and accountability for FirstNet Authority. So even though AT&T is managing a lot of this stuff, the physical aspect of it, the government is actually doing the accountability and oversight, ensuring that AT&T is making their benchmarks, they're satisfying customer requests in the particular amount of time, the deadline set by the government that says you have to be able to respond in this particular amount of time, and ensuring that the overall vision of the network is coming to fruition, and those public local government organizations are being listened to and their needs are being met in order to support their emergency management needs. So there's over 3 million FirstNet connections right now. That's individual devices. So that's not just cell phones on it, but that could be your tablet, your laptop. You could have a cell phone, a laptop, or a tablet. You may have an in-car router or vehicle router. One thing to potentially think about is doing FirstNet with a router and linking that to ReadyOps. So we can run potentially ReadyOps through a dedicated network for the digital communications over long areas. So that's why I invited the communications guys to this one for this emergency service professional development session. Again, this is its own network. So it's not, your Apple iTunes store necessarily for this, but there's over 190 apps in the FirstNet app catalog. So it has its own operating system that sort of loads when you put the SIM card in on these devices. And these are emergency management based apps, but I mean, you still have email, secure web browsers, but a lot of the emergency management applications and stuff are approved and loaded on there. So I mean, 190 applications just for emergency management, emergency response field. That's pretty impressive. Over 370 FirstNet ready devices. That means they meet the security protocols and standards set forth, and then the bandwidth requirements. And pretty much all the major companies that produce mobile devices, they want on board with this, so they make their devices meet the requirements for this. So pretty much if you buy a new device within the last couple of years, it is going to be FirstNet ready. And then there's 2.71 million square miles of LTE coverage nationwide. They're testing 5G right now. It's not 5G ready yet. There's a lot of security stuff that has to go into that and test. But it is 2.71 million square miles of LTE coverage. And then there's over 100,000 square miles just in 2020 built alone. So AT&T is building the stuff out really quick, and it's just getting more better and better. So every fully commercial tower they put up is also dedicated to FirstNet, and then there are towers that they built based on FirstNet requirements that then they'll pay the government to use that bandwidth until emergency kicks off. And then over 100 plus dedicated deployable network assets. And so the flying cows, that's those SUASs. FirstNet 1, that's your mobile satellite cell towers, or mobile cell towers. And then 95+% of the band 14 coverage has been completed, and AT&T is continuing to try outpace the goals and objectives set by the government. And then there's been over 800 solutions deployed for public safety in 2021. So that's really good support. And this brief was updated. It says here January 26th. So this doesn't account for the hurricanes that we've had this year that we supported, the tornadoes and flooding and everything else that FirstNet has been used for. So, okay, let's go back. Technical difficulties again here. The presentation keeps bouncing off. Okay, that should be shared again. All right, well, it ended just in time there. So hopefully everybody found this educational and useful. Like I said, I had heard a lot about FirstNet from different organizations, but not too many people had a lot of information on it, knew what it was used for, how to apply for it. So once I was able to talk to the FirstNet representatives here at the National CERT Conference, and they agreed to share their slides with me and allow me to give this presentation to you, I wanted to jump on board and get it out there to our Civil Air Patrol members as quick as possible. So if you have questions, you can reach out to me and I can answer what I can, but I would rather you reach out to FirstNet directly, go to their website. Let me try to pull up their website here for you and share that with you. I should have had this pre-staged, right? So what happens when you're flying by the wire here. Okay, and share the screen. And the pricing plans, the pricing for these plans are pretty good. Let's see here. Where did it go? Normally, I have many monitors. Again, I'm trying to do all this stuff off of a single laptop screen here. So here's the FirstNet website, firstnet.com. You can explore, get started, of course, offers. So if you do individual first responders, or you can do, I have to go in and go through these. So if you're agency, first responders, you have to find your agency. Or your organization can prepay and get certain devices and everything. Most of us, what we are going to do is we're going to do individual first responders, and you can get a deal. So if you don't already have a new iPhone, if you purchase the iPhone with your subscription, again, I'm not trying to sell anything here, I'm just giving you the information. I'm not getting kickbacks from FirstNet. I'm not trying to get you to buy it, just informative. But as you can see here, the iPhone 13 Pro or up, you get $700 off, which is huge. You can see what phones or devices, new existing customers, you get all these deals. Yeah. Galaxies, watches. You can link your smartwatch if you're an Apple Watch user, or others, you can link those up. I'm trying to find the monthly plans here. I had it. Maybe this is what it is. So you can apply online. Here's what the check eligibility is. If you're, I have to see, I don't know if we have a code for Civil Air Patrol. I thought I used to see it on member benefits on the national website. I need to go look again. But you scroll through here, like, hey, here we are, Civil Air Patrol. Continue, current role. And right now it's only giving cap pilot. Continue, are you volunteer? So it's focusing on the Civil Air Patrol, the search and rescue pilot, and you go through. Now, because it's asking these for Civil Air Patrol, I'm going to email again to ensure if it's just for the pilots. And I want to get that email sent out just in case somebody is going through this and like, oh no, it only says pilot. I want confirmation. So I'll reach out to the representative again and get that information. And that is not where I wanted to go. Plans. That's where I just wanted to go. So as you can see for the plans here, your responder unlimited with tethering. So if you're going to be using your phone as your mobile hotspot to run, say, WIMRs and doing, if you're a planning section chief or anything, it's $45 a month. Wearable devices you can add, and it's just like shopping for a normal cell phone plan. And just with the fact that you're a first responder and you're going to be providing services over this network for a disaster. So this is what I wanted to show. And like I said, I'll reach back out and make sure that if you're a pilot, you're good. So if you're a pilot, but I want to get a little bit more documentation on that, and I'll get it sent out to you guys, or I'll post it as an additional link, or I'll put it in Teams, depending on if it's controlled on CUI or controlled unclassified information, or if it's proprietary information based on the interaction with the representative. Once I find that out, I will get it posted as broad as I'm allowed to share it. But what they made it sound like when I was talking to them is, as long as you're an emergency management role and you have a qualification as an incident management team or ICS staff, ground branch director, search and rescue personnel, because we would likely be, if you're a ground team, as we get more people on SAR-TOPO and get you trained up on, SAR-TOPO, you'd be using cell data to keep your tracks and send that back to the search manager potentially in SAR-TOPO, so we can calculate probability of detection and see your routes and archiving that stuff. So if you have any questions, again, reach out to me. I owe you guys a little bit more information, but hopefully you found this useful, and I will see you guys, I believe, next week. Should be session 2 of the leadership development. So we're going to be looking at another leadership trait, diving down into it, and yeah. And I'll be back at the home studio, the home office, so better sound, better internet, better lighting. So look forward to seeing you guys next week. And again, please share this out and with your squadrons or your groups or whoever want to get more engagement. I really love doing professional development stuff and these type of series, because we do a lot on the education and training side, but we don't focus on our emergency services people. And there's a lot of professional development that needs to be conducted to manage teams, to be technically and tactically proficient, but also as we start getting up there in our qualifications and integrating with civilian emergency management organizations, they're going to expect a higher level of professionalism and knowledge and background. And the only way we can do this is if we do homegrown grassroots education programs or professional development stuff. So if you have ideas or if you have questions or there's topics that you really want us to dive into, hit me up at Stephen, that's with a PH, .littlewood at VA Victor Alpha WG Whiskey Golf .cap.gov with your questions or topics or anything, and I will do my best to, if I can't create it and provide the class, I have a ton of resources and I'll reach out, I'll find an expert to bring them in and have them be a guest lecturer and do the presentation. So thank you again, everybody, for joining me, and I will see you during the next session.